What if the consequences of war extend beyond the battlefield, into the shadows of makeshift camps and questionable decisions? In the spring of 1945, as the echoes of World War II faded across Europe, a new chapter began on the banks of the Rhine. Here, the United States Army established the Rheinwiesen camps, sprawling enclosures that would soon hold hundreds of thousands of German prisoners of war. Initially envisioned as a temporary solution to manage and disarm the defeated German forces, these camps were not set up with the infrastructure typical of permanent prisoner of war camps. Instead, they were makeshift, often lacking adequate shelter, food, or medical care. This was a time of chaos and rapid decisions, aimed at dealing swiftly with the remnants of a shattered enemy. But what started as a logistical necessity quickly spiraled into a series of ethical and humanitarian challenges. As we peel back the layers of history, we uncover the complex and disturbing realities of the Rheinwiesen camps. In the immediate aftermath of victory, chaos and necessity birthed the Rheinwiesen camps. As the Second World War drew to a close in Europe, the Allied forces, spearheaded by the United States and Britain, made a rapid and decisive advance into the heart of Germany. This swift movement brought about an unforeseen consequence: the massive surrender of German troops, numbering in the hundreds of thousands. Faced with an overwhelming influx of prisoners of war, the Allies encountered a logistical nightmare. The challenge was not just in the sheer volume of POWs, but also in providing them with food, shelter, and basic humanitarian care. Traditional facilities were either too distant, overfilled, or simply non-existent. This predicament necessitated an immediate and practical solution. Thus, along the banks of the Rhine River, a series of temporary enclosures known as the Rheinwiesen camps were hastily constructed. These camps were not initially intended to be long-term solutions, but were rather improvised responses to the urgent need for mass containment of prisoners. Stretching from Remagen to Koblenz and beyond, these camps quickly became sprawling tent cities, filled with thousands of POWs held in open fields, surrounded by barbed wire. The establishment of the Rheinwiesen camps was a testament to the chaotic end of the war, where rapid decisions had to be made amidst the uncertainties of a post-war Europe. They were in essence a direct reflection of the tumultuous times, a stopgap measure in the wake of a crumbling Third Reich. With the war's end in sight, these camps were a quick solution to an unexpected problem. Imagine living in a field, surrounded by barbed wire under the open sky, regardless of the weather. This was the stark reality for hundreds of thousands of prisoners in the Rheinwiesen camps after World War II. The vast open fields that stretched across the Rhine River Valley were hastily converted into enclosures, where the prisoners lived in extremely harsh conditions. The camps, initially intended for temporary holding, swelled rapidly, far exceeding their capacity. Eyewitness accounts tell us of the sea of people as far as the eye could see, each one struggling to find space on the cold, hard ground. The overcrowding was severe. Privacy was a concept as absent as the tents that were supposed to shelter them. Shelter, in fact, was nothing more than patches of earth. The lucky few managed to craft makeshift coverings from scraps of fabric or wood, but most were exposed to the elements. Rain or shine, the weather bore down on the beleaguered inhabitants, turning the ground into mud during rains, and baking it hard under the sun. Food was another critical issue. Rations were meager, and often not sufficient to sustain health. Accounts from the camps describe the food as barely enough to stave off hunger, let alone provide proper nutrition. This led to widespread malnutrition and in some cases starvation. The haunting images of emaciated figures waiting for their next meager serving are a chilling testament to their plight. Sanitary conditions were equally appalling. With inadequate facilities to accommodate the massive influx of prisoners, basic hygiene became a luxury. The scarcity of water and lack of sanitation facilities led to unsanitary conditions ripe for the spread of diseases. Eyewitnesses recall the spread of illness with little to no medical care available, exacerbating the suffering of the prisoners. Amidst these dire conditions, the human spirit's resilience was tested daily. Reports from the time highlight not only the physical challenges but also the psychological toll on the prisoners. The constant uncertainty, fear, and struggle for basic necessities were a daily ordeal that many did not survive. The harsh realities inside these camps reveal a side of war rarely discussed in victory parades. Every coin has two sides, and the Rheinwiesen camps were no exception. As the dust settled after World War II, The Rheinwiesen camps, initially set up to manage the vast number of German soldiers captured by Allied forces, quickly became a subject of intense scrutiny and controversy. Central to the debate was the classification of these German detainees not as prisoners of war, but as disarmed enemy forces, or DFs. This subtle yet significant reclassification had profound implications on the treatment these individuals received while detained. Under the Geneva Conventions, prisoners of war are entitled to certain protections and standards of treatment. However, by labeling the detainees as DEFs, the Allied forces effectively placed them in a category that did not guarantee these rights. The conditions in the camps, as a result, were harsh and often severe. Food was scarce, shelter was inadequate, and medical care was minimal. The question that arises then is whether this treatment was a deliberate act of retribution by the Allied forces, or merely a consequence of the overwhelming logistical challenges faced at the end of a devastating global conflict. Historians remain divided on this issue. Some argue that the harsh conditions in the Rheinwiesen camps were a calculated move, intended to punish the German soldiers for their country's role in the war. Others suggest that the circumstances were the product of a chaotic post-war environment where resources were limited and the logistical capacity to manage such a large population of detainees simply did not exist. Further complicating the issue is the fact that records and testimonies from the time provide conflicting accounts. Some former detainees recount experiences of severe neglect and intentional mistreatment, while others recall the chaos and disorganization, pointing more to a lack of planning and resources rather than systematic abuse. As we delve deeper into the shadows of this controversial chapter of history, it becomes increasingly difficult to discern the motivations behind the decisions made during those turbulent times. The line between oversight and intent blurs in the fog of post-war chaos. As the world moved forward, the shadows of the Rheinwiesen camps lingered. The closure of these camps marked an end to a harrowing chapter in post-war history, yet the echoes of their existence resounded long after the last prisoner was released. The survivors, carrying the scars of their experiences, reintegrated into a world vastly different from the one they had known. For many, the journey to rebuild their lives was fraught with challenges, overshadowed by the memories of deprivation and loss. In the decades that followed, the narrative of the Rheinwiesen camps was woven into the broader tapestry of World War II's aftermath. Yet it occupied a contentious and often overlooked niche in historical discourse. The complexity of these camps, characterized by their makeshift nature and the sheer number of detainees, posed difficult questions about the boundaries of wartime conduct and post-war responsibility. The impact on US-German relations was palpable. Initially, the existence of the camps strained diplomatic ties. However, as the Cold War reshaped global alliances, both nations gradually forged a partnership anchored in strategic interests and mutual economic growth. This partnership, however, could not erase the lingering questions about the moral implications of the Rheinwiesen camps. The lessons gleaned from this dark period influenced military and humanitarian operations in subsequent conflicts. They underscored the importance of adhering to international laws and norms, even in the chaotic aftermath of war. The principles of humane treatment and the rights of prisoners were highlighted, shaping protocols and policies in both military strategy and international humanitarian efforts. The legacy of the Rheinwiesen camps serves as a sobering reminder of the complexities and ethical dilemmas faced in times of war. It challenges historians, policymakers, and military leaders to reflect on the past to better navigate the moral landscapes of future conflicts. History's lessons often come at a great cost, one that the Rheinwiesen camps paid in full. Reflecting on history allows us to confront its complexities and its darker chapters. The Rheinwiesen camps, a series of prisoner-of-war encampments established by the Allied forces along the Rhine River following Germany's surrender in World War II, serve as a poignant example of these challenges. Initially set up to process and detain German soldiers, these camps were not merely facilities for containment but became arenas of severe hardship. Life within these confines was marked by overcrowding, scarce resources, and harsh conditions, a stark contrast to the Geneva Convention standards. The camps housed hundreds of thousands, and as resources thinned, so did the line between detention and suffering. The controversies surrounding the Rheinwiesen camps are manifold. Debates continue about the intent and management of these camps. Were they a necessary measure in the chaotic aftermath of war, or a punitive act that swayed from ethical conduct? These questions probe the delicate balance between justice and vengeance, between order and oppression. Moreover, the legacy of these camps underscores a broader historical narrative. They remind us of the human capacity for both endurance and oversight, serving as a critical study in the power dynamics at the end of a conflict. How history judges these actions often depends on the lens through which we view them. As we reflect on the Rheinwiesen camps, we are invited to think critically about the moral dilemmas that nations face in the aftermath of war. What is the cost of victory, and who pays the price? These questions do not solicit simple answers but demand a thoughtful engagement with the past. In the end, the Rheinwiesen camps challenge us to reflect on the ethical dimensions of war and victory, urging us never to forget the shadows cast by even the most justified conflicts.